The dust-laden wind carried the distant sound of hooves as Penelope Evans clutched the creased letter to her chest. Her 3 weary charges huddled against her skirts in the shadow of Promise Creek's small railway station. The year was 1875, and she had traveled over 2,000 miles from Boston with nothing but hope, 3 orphaned children, and the promise of marriage to a man she'd never met. Kansas was nothing like she had imagined. The vastness of the plains stretched in every direction, broken only by scattered homesteads and the occasional rise of hills in the distance. Penelope smoothed her travel-worn dress, patting the golden locket at her throat, the last remembrance of her parents, while scanning the horizon for any sign of her intended husband. "Miss Penny, is he coming?" 7-year-old Thomas tugged at her skirt, his small face pinched with worry beneath a mop of sandy hair. "Of course he is," Penelope replied, trying to inject confidence into her voice. "Mr. Everett's letter said he would meet us at noon." 5-year-old Sarah clutched her rag doll tighter. "What if he doesn't like us?" "Nonsense." Penelope knelt down, gathering the 3 children closer. "Mr. Everett will adore you all." 10-year-old Mary, the oldest and most skeptical, crossed her arms. "You haven't even met him. How can you be sure?" Penelope had no answer. The truth was, she wasn't sure of anything anymore. After the fever had swept through the orphanage where she'd worked in Boston, taking so many innocent lives, including the parents of these 3 children who had been temporarily boarding there, she had made an impulsive decision. Responding to an advertisement for a mail-order bride from a Kansas cattle rancher seemed like divine providence, a way to escape the memories and provide these children with a home and future. The distant figure of a rider appeared on the horizon, and Penelope's heart quickened. She straightened her posture, adjusted her bonnet, and gathered the children behind her. The rider approached at a steady pace, and as he drew closer, Penelope could make out a broad-shouldered man astride a chestnut stallion. His face was shaded by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see the strong line of his jaw and the way his eyes assessed her from a distance. "Miss Evans." His deep voice carried across the remaining space between them as he dismounted with fluid grace that belied his size. "Mr. Everett." Penelope stepped forward, her hand extended formally. "Kent Everett, madam." He removed his hat, revealing thick dark hair with strands of silver at the temples. His face was weathered by sun and wind, and a small scar traced a line along his left cheekbone. But it was his eyes that captured her attention, deep blue, and filled with something she couldn't quite decipher. Surprise, perhaps, or disappointment. His gaze moved from her face to the 3 children standing behind her, and his expression hardened. "You didn't mention children in your letters." Penelope's heart sank. I assumed the agency would have informed you." Kent's jaw tightened. "They did not." An uncomfortable silence fell between them. The children shifted nervously, and Thomas's small hand found Penelope's, squeezing it tightly. "I suppose we should discuss this matter in private," Kent finally said, his voice carefully controlled. "The wagon is just beyond that ridge. I'll fetch your trunks." As he turned to secure their luggage, Penelope knelt down to the children's level. "Everything will be fine," she whispered, hoping she sounded more confident than she felt. Mary's piercing gaze met hers. "He doesn't want us." "He's surprised, that's all," Penelope insisted. "Give him time." The journey to Kent's ranch was marked by strained silence, broken only by Sarah's occasional questions about prairie dogs or distant buffalo. Kent answered politely but tersely, his focus seemingly on the road ahead. Penelope found herself stealing glances at his profile, noting the tension in his shoulders and the white-knuckled grip he maintained on the reins. As they crested a final hill, Kent's ranch came into view, a substantial 2-story house with a wide porch, surrounded by several outbuildings, corrals, and pastures where cattle grazed in the distance. Despite the tension, Penelope felt a flutter of hope. This place could be home. "It's beautiful," she said softly. Kent's expression softened slightly. "Been in my family for 20 years. My father built it with his own hands." "And you've been alone here since?" Penelope ventured, recalling the vague references to widowhood in his letters. "Since Anna passed 5 years ago." His voice was flat, emotionless. "Fever took her and our son." The revelation that Kent had been a father struck Penelope with new understanding. She glanced at the children in the back of the wagon, now wide-eyed at the prospect of their new home, and back to Kent's rigid profile. As they pulled up to the house, a weathered man with a shock of white hair emerged from one of the barns, followed by a younger man who bore a striking resemblance to Kent. "That's Hank, my foreman," Kent explained, "and my brother Patrick. He helps run things." Kent brought the wagon to a stop and helped Penelope down, his strong hands briefly encircling her waist before he stepped back, maintaining a careful distance. "I'll show you to your rooms," he said stiffly. "You can get settled while I speak with Patrick." The inside of the house was surprisingly well kept, with sturdy furniture and modest but tasteful decorations. A large hearth dominated the main room, and a staircase led to the upper floor. "The children can share the 2 rooms at the end of the hall," Kent said, leading them upstairs. "You'll have the room across from mine." He pushed open a door to reveal a spacious bedroom with a 4-poster bed and a window overlooking the plains. "It's lovely," Penelope said, genuinely impressed. "Thank you," Kent nodded curtly. "We'll discuss arrangements at supper." With that, he turned and headed back down the stairs, his footsteps heavy on the wooden planks. Penelope helped the children settle into their rooms, unpacking their meager belongings and reassuring them that everything would work out. But as she arranged her own possessions in her new room, doubt crept in. Kent Everett clearly hadn't expected children, and the news of his lost son explained his reaction all too well. Later, seated around the large oak dining table, the tension was palpable. Kent sat at the head, with Penelope to his right and the children arranged beside her. Patrick sat across from her, his friendly demeanor a stark contrast to his brother's rigid posture. "So," Patrick said, breaking the uncomfortable silence, "how was your journey from Boston?" Penelope smiled gratefully. Long but educational, the children had never seen the country beyond Massachusetts before. "I saw buffalo," Thomas announced proudly, "and Indians," Sarah added, her eyes wide. Mary remained silent, watching Kent with wary eyes. Kent cleared his throat. "Miss Evans, after supper, I'd like a word in private." The meal continued with Patrick making valiant attempts at conversation while Kent ate methodically, occasionally answering direct questions but otherwise maintaining his reserve. After the dishes were cleared and the children sent upstairs with promises of bedtime stories, Penelope followed Kent into a small study off the main room. He closed the door and turned to face her, his expression grave. "Miss Evans, I believe there's been a serious misunderstanding." "I understand your surprise, Mr. Everett," Penelope began, "but these children, I can't be a father again." His voice was raw with emotion. "I didn't agree to take in orphans." Penelope's heart raced. "They have nowhere else to go. Their parents died at the orphanage where I worked." "And that's tragic, but they're good children," she pressed on. "Mary is already capable with household tasks, Thomas is eager to learn about ranching, and Sarah, Miss Evans," Kent's voice was firm. "I lost my son. I watched him die, helpless to save him. I can't." He trailed off, turning to stare out the window at the darkening plains. Penelope stepped closer, her own voice softening. "I understand your loss, Mr. Everett, I truly do, but sometimes life gives us second chances we don't expect." Kent turned back to her, his expression guarded. "What exactly is your relationship to these children?" "I was their teacher at the orphanage. When their parents died, they were visiting from England. There was no one to claim them. The orphanage was already overcrowded and after the fever." She swallowed hard. "I couldn't bear to see them separated or sent to different homes. When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like providence." Kent ran a hand through his hair, sighing deeply. "I needed a wife, Miss Evans, a companion, not an instant family. Then I've deceived you, though not intentionally." Penelope lifted her chin. "If you wish to nullify our arrangement, I understand. We can leave on tomorrow's train." Something flickered in Kent's eyes, regret perhaps, or uncertainty. "And go where?" Penelope faltered. "I have some savings, we'll manage." Kent studied her for a long moment, then sighed again. "No, I won't turn away children, regardless of the circumstances. You can stay, all of you, until we figure out a more permanent solution." "Thank you," Penelope whispered, relief flooding through her. "We won't be a burden, I promise." There are conditions, Kent said firmly. The children will need to earn their keep. Even the little ones can have small responsibilities, and our arrangement will remain formal until we decide how to proceed. Penelope nodded. Of course. We'll discuss it further in the morning. You must be tired from your journey. As Penelope turned to leave, Kent spoke again, his voice softer than before. For what it's worth, Miss Evans, you seem like a kind woman. These children are fortunate to have someone who cares for them so deeply. The compliment, unexpected and sincere, warmed her. Good night, Mr. Everett, Kent, he corrected. If we're to live under the same roof, you might as well use my given name. Penelope, she offered in return, though the children call me Penny. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. Good night, Penelope. That night, as Penelope readied herself for bed, she could hear Kent moving about in the room across the hall. The thin wall between them seemed both a barrier and a tenuous connection to this man she had agreed to marry, this stranger who now held their futures in his hands. She crept down the hall to check on the children, finding Thomas and Sarah already asleep in their shared room. In the adjacent room, Mary sat by the window, staring out at the star-filled sky. You should be sleeping, Penelope said softly. He doesn't want us, Mary stated flatly. Penelope sat beside her on the narrow bed. He's agreed we can stay, for now. Mary's young face was set in lines too mature for her years. I've seen how it goes, Miss Penny. People take you in, then send you away when you become inconvenient. That won't happen, Penelope insisted, though uncertainty gnawed at her. Kent Mr. Everett is a good man. He's just wounded because his son died. Yes, Penelope smoothed Mary's dark hair. Loss changes people, Mary. You know that better than most. Mary nodded slowly. Do you think he'll ever want us, really want us? I hope so, Penelope replied honestly. But even if things don't work out exactly as I planned, I promise we'll stay together, all of us. Mary's small hand found hers in the darkness. I believe you. As Penelope returned to her own room, she paused outside Kent's door, hearing what sounded like quiet conversation. Curious, she leaned closer. I don't know what I'm doing, Anna. Kent's voice was barely audible. 3 children. What was I thinking letting them stay? Penelope's heart constricted. He was speaking to his dead wife. The woman seems decent enough, he continued. Determined, reminds me a little of you. Penelope stepped back, feeling like an intruder. As she slipped into her own room, she wondered what kind of woman Anna had been, and whether Kent would ever be able to open his heart again to her or to the children who needed him so desperately. Morning arrived with the crow of a rooster and the distant lowing of cattle. Penelope dressed quickly in her plainest dress, pinning her honey-brown hair into a practical bun. Today would be their first full day at the ranch, and she was determined to prove their worth. She found Kent already in the kitchen, stirring a pot of something that smelled remarkably appealing. Good morning, she offered tentatively. He glanced up, surprise evident in his eyes. You're up early. I wanted to help with breakfast. Kent gestured to the stove. Already handled, but there's coffee if you'd like some. Penelope poured herself a cup, noting the neat organization of the kitchen. You keep a tidy home. Necessity, Kent replied with a shrug. A ranch doesn't run itself, and neither does a household. Do you have help? Besides your brother and the foreman, I mean, Mrs. Winters comes in twice a week for heavier cleaning. Otherwise, it's just us men. He stirred the porridge again. I suppose having a woman around again will be an adjustment. Before Penelope could respond, small footsteps thundered down the stairs and Thomas burst into the kitchen, followed more sedately by Sarah and Mary. Good morning, Thomas announced brightly, seemingly unaffected by yesterday's tension. Is that breakfast? I'm starving. Kent looked momentarily startled by the child's exuberance but recovered quickly. Porridge with honey. There's milk in the springhouse if someone would fetch it. I can do that, Mary volunteered, her tone cautious but willing. Kent nodded. The springhouse is just behind the kitchen garden. Can't miss it. As Mary went to fetch the milk, Penelope helped Sarah and Thomas wash their hands at the basin. Kent watched them silently, his expression unreadable. Mr. Everett was just telling me about the ranch, Penelope said, attempting to draw him into conversation. Perhaps after breakfast he could show us around. Kent hesitated, then nodded. I suppose you should know the layout of the place. Patrick and I need to check the north pasture fence line today, but I can spare an hour this morning. Breakfast was a livelier affair than the previous night's supper, with Thomas peppering Kent with questions about horses and cattle. To Penelope's surprise, Kent answered patiently, occasionally even demonstrating a hint of dry humor that made Thomas giggle. "Can I help with the horses?" Thomas asked eagerly. "I'm strong for my age." Kent regarded him thoughtfully. "The horses we keep here aren't playthings, boy, they're working animals." "I wouldn't play with them," Thomas insisted. "I'd help feed them and brush them and such." "Have you ever been around horses before?" Thomas shook his head. "Only the carriage horses in Boston, and we weren't allowed to touch those." Something shifted in Kent's expression, a softening around the eyes. "We'll see. Start small, perhaps. Collecting eggs from the henhouse might be more your speed for now." Thomas's face fell slightly, but he nodded. "Yes, sir. I could help with cooking," Mary offered quietly. "I used to help in the orphanage kitchen." Kent glanced at her, then at Penelope. "That might be arranged. Mrs. Winters isn't much for cooking anyway, mostly handles the washing and such." "I can sew," Sarah piped up, not wanting to be left out. "Miss Penny taught me. Did she now?" Kent's gaze shifted to Penelope, his expression thoughtful. "Well, there's always mending to be done on a ranch." After breakfast, Kent led them on a tour of the ranch. The main house sat on a gentle rise, overlooking corrals, barns, and outbuildings. Beyond stretched fenced pastures where cattle grazed lazily in the morning sun. "The ranch covers about 5,000 acres, Kent explained as they walked. "Good grazing land, plenty of water. My father knew what he was doing when he settled here." "It's magnificent," Penelope said sincerely, taking in the vastness of it all. "You must be proud of what you've built." Kent's expression softened slightly. "It's been hard work, especially these past few years. The drought 2 summers ago nearly broke us, but you persevered, didn't have much choice." His voice was matter of fact. "This land is all I have." As they approached the main barn, Patrick emerged, leading a dappled gray mare. He smiled broadly when he spotted them. "Morning tour." "Miss Evans and the children should know their way around," Kent replied. Patrick winked at the children. "The important things to know are where the cookie jar is kept and which horses not to bother." Sarah giggled, immediately warming to Kent's younger brother. "Which horses shouldn't we bother?" "That one for starters." Patrick pointed to a spirited black stallion in a separate corral. "That's Demon, and he lives up to his name. Kent's the only one who can handle him properly." Kent's expression betrayed a flicker of pride. "He's a good horse, just needs a firm hand." "Like someone else I know," Patrick muttered, earning a sharp look from his brother. The tour continued to the chicken coop, the smokehouse, the vegetable garden, and finally to a small fenced area behind the house where a cluster of wooden crosses stood in solemn tribute. Kent stopped, his posture stiffening. "Family cemetery," he said simply. Penelope noticed a smaller cross, newer than the others, and understood without asking that it belonged to Kent's son. She placed a gentle hand on his arm, their first physical contact since he had helped her from the wagon. "I'm sorry for your losses," she said softly. Kent nodded once, jaw tight, then turned away. "I should get to work. Patrick's waiting." "Of course." Penelope gathered the children with her eyes. "We'll find ways to make ourselves useful." Kent paused, regarding her with an unreadable expression. "Penelope," he said finally, "thank you for understanding." Before she could respond, he strode away, his long legs carrying him swiftly toward the barn where Patrick waited. Penelope watched him go, wondering at the complex man. She had agreed to marry a man clearly still haunted by his past, but perhaps not entirely closed to the future. The days fell into a rhythm as May turned to June. Penelope took charge of the household, cooking meals, tending the garden, and keeping the house in order. The children, eager to prove themselves, embraced their new responsibilities with varying degrees of success. Mary, serious and responsible, took to helping in the kitchen and with the laundry. Thomas, after initially being restricted to egg collection, gradually earned limited responsibilities in the stables under the watchful eye of Hank, the foreman. Little Sarah trailed after Mrs. Winters during her visits, learning to dust and polish with surprising diligence for a 5-year-old. Kent remained reserved but civil, gradually spending more time with them during meals and occasionally in the evenings. He answered the children's questions about ranch life with increasing patience, and Penelope sometimes caught him watching them with an expression that hinted at something beyond mere tolerance. One evening, as Penelope sat on the porch mending one of Kent's shirts, he joined her, settling into the adjacent rocking chair with a sigh of exhaustion. "Long day?" she inquired, not looking up from her stitching. "Roundup's coming. Always plenty to do before then." He stretched his long legs out before him, rolling his shoulders to ease the tension. "Patrick thinks we should hire more hands this year. Will you?" Kent shrugged. "Maybe. Cattle prices are good right now, might be worth the investment." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of Kent's chair and the soft whisper of Penelope's needle through fabric. "You're good with them," Kent said finally. "The children," Penelope glanced up, surprised by the comment. "Thank you." "They've settled in better than I expected." He rubbed his jaw thoughtfully. "Thomas has a way with the horses, reminds me of." He trailed off, but Penelope knew he was thinking of his son. "Children are adaptable," she said gently, "and they're grateful to be here, to have a home." Kent's eyes met hers. "Is that what this is to you? A home?" The question caught her off guard. I'd like it to be." "And what of our arrangement?" His voice was carefully neutral. "We haven't spoken of it since your arrival." Penelope set her mending aside, giving him her full attention. "I understand if you've reconsidered. The circumstances aren't what you expected." "No, they're not." Kent leaned forward, elbows on his knees. "But I've been thinking, perhaps it's not such a bad thing having children around again. The house was too quiet before." Hope fluttered in Penelope's chest. "Does that mean—" "I'm not promising anything," Kent cautioned, "but I'm not dismissing the possibility either. We should give ourselves time, get to know one another properly." "I'd like that," Penelope said softly. Kent nodded, a hint of a smile touching his lips. "Good." He rose, stretching again. "I should turn in. Early start tomorrow." As he reached the door, he paused. "Penelope, thank you for your patience with me. I know I haven't been the most welcoming." "You've had your reasons," she replied. "Good night, Kent." The next morning dawned clear and bright. Penelope woke to the sound of excited voices and hurried downstairs to find Kent showing the children how to make flapjacks, his sleeves rolled up and a smudge of flour on his cheek. "Miss Penny," Sarah exclaimed. "Mr. Kent is teaching us to cook." "I see that," Penelope said, unable to hide her surprise or her smile. Kent looked almost embarrassed. "Thought they should learn. Useful skill out here." "Absolutely," Penelope agreed, joining them at the stove. "Although your technique could use some refinement." Kent raised an eyebrow. "Is that so?" "The batter's too thick," Penelope demonstrated by adding more milk. "See, now it will pour properly." Kent watched her hands as she worked. "Learn something new every day." The domestic scene was interrupted by Patrick's arrival, his expression urgent. "Kent, trouble at the north pasture. Jeffries rode in just now, says there's rustlers." Kent's demeanor changed instantly, all warmth vanishing as he wiped his hands on a towel. "How many?" "At least 6, according to Jeffries. They've already taken about 20 head. Get the men together. I'll be right behind you." Patrick nodded and hurried out. Kent turned to Penelope, his expression grim. "Stay in the house today, all of you." "Kent," Penelope said, concern evident in her voice, "be careful." Something flickered in his eyes, surprise, perhaps, at her worry for him. "Always am." He hesitated, then added, "I'll be back by sundown if I'm not." "You will be," Penelope said firmly. The day passed with excruciating slowness. Penelope kept the children occupied with lessons and chores, but her mind constantly returned to Kent and the danger he might be facing. Cattle rustlers were known to be dangerous, often desperate men who wouldn't hesitate to use violence. As the sun began its descent toward the horizon, Penelope found herself repeatedly drawn to the windows, scanning the distance for any sign of riders. The children, sensing her anxiety, grew quiet and watchful. "Is Mr. Kent going to be all right?" Sarah asked, her small face pinched with worry. "Of course he is," Penelope assured her, wishing she felt as confident as she sounded. "He knows this land better than anyone. What if the bad men hurt him?" Thomas's voice was small. Penelope gathered the children close. "Mr. Kent is very brave and very smart. And he's not alone, he has Patrick and all the ranch hands with him." Mary, perceptive as always, studied Penelope's face. "You're worried too. A little, Penelope admitted, but that's what families do. We worry about each other. Are we a family? Thomas asked hopefully. With Mr. Kent. The question hung in the air, and Penelope chose her words carefully. We're becoming one, I think. These things take time. The sound of hoofbeats interrupted their conversation, and Penelope rushed to the window. Relief flooded through her at the sight of riders approaching Kent at the lead, followed by Patrick and the others. They're back, she announced, and the children crowded around her to see. As the riders drew closer, Penelope noticed that Kent was slumped slightly in his saddle, and alarm replaced relief. She hurried outside, the children at her heels, as the men dismounted in the yard. Kent, she called, hurrying toward him. He turned at her voice, and she saw the blood-stained bandage wrapped around his upper arm. His face was drawn with pain and exhaustion, but he managed a reassuring nod. It's nothing, he said as she reached him. Just a graze. You're hurt, she insisted, gently examining the bandage. This needs proper attention. Kent allowed her to lead him into the house, the children following anxiously behind. Patrick caught Penelope's eye and gave a slight nod, indicating that the situation was under control. In the kitchen, Penelope directed Kent to sit while she gathered clean bandages and the medicinal supplies she had brought from Boston. The children hovered nearby, wide-eyed with concern. Did you catch the rustlers? Thomas asked as Penelope carefully removed the makeshift bandage from Kent's arm. Kent winced slightly but nodded. Got most of them. Sheriff's taking them to town. And the cattle? Mary inquired. All accounted for, Kent replied, his eyes meeting Penelope's as she cleaned his wound. Thanks to Hank's tracking skills. The bullet had indeed just grazed him, tearing through flesh but missing bone and major vessels. Still, the wound was angry and deep enough to require careful cleaning and bandaging. You were fortunate, Penelope murmured as she worked. Kent watched her capable hands with a mixture of pain and something else, admiration, perhaps. Been through worse. That doesn't make it any less serious, she chided gently. You could have been killed. Were you worried about me, Penelope? There was a hint of teasing in his voice despite his obvious discomfort. She met his gaze steadily. Of course I was. We all were. The children nodded vigorously in agreement, and something in Kent's expression softened as he looked at their concerned faces. Well, he said after a moment, I appreciate the concern, but it would take more than a few rustlers to keep me from coming home. Home. The word hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. That night after the children were asleep, Penelope found Kent on the porch again, staring out at the star-filled sky. His wounded arm was cradled against his chest, but his posture was more relaxed than she had yet seen it. You should be resting, she admonished gently, joining him. Too restless, he admitted. Days like today, they get the blood up. Penelope nodded, understanding. The children were very impressed by your heroics. Kent chuckled softly. Hardly heroics, just doing what needs doing. To them, that's heroism enough. She paused, then added, they care about you, you know. In just a few weeks, you've become important to them. Kent was silent for a long moment. I care about them too, he said finally, his voice low. More than I expected to. And me. The question slipped out before Penelope could reconsider it. Kent turned to look at her, his expression serious in the moonlight. You most of all, Penelope Evans. Her breath caught at the unexpected admission. Kent, I'm not good with words, he interrupted. Never have been. But having you and the children here, it's changed things. Changed me, I think. For the better, I hope. A small smile tugged at his lips. Definitely for the better. In that moment, with the night around them and the stars overhead, something shifted between them, a barrier lowering, a possibility opening. Kent reached out with his good arm, his hand finding hers in the darkness. I think, he said softly, that I'd like to revisit our arrangement. Properly this time. Penelope's heart quickened. What did you have in mind? A real courtship for starters, and if things progress as I hope they might. He squeezed her hand gently. Well, we'll see. Penelope smiled, happiness warming her from within. I think I'd like that very much. Summer unfurled across the Kansas plains, bringing long, hot days and brief, dramatic thunderstorms that replenished the earth. As the land flourished, so too did the tentative connections forming between the unlikely family at the Everett ranch. Kent's courtship of Penelope was careful and considerate. He brought her wildflowers gathered during his rides across the ranch, carved a beautiful hair comb from cherry wood, and made time each evening to sit with her on the porch, talking of their pasts and cautiously exploring possibilities for their future. The children blossomed under the combined attention of both adults. Thomas, now allowed regular supervised time in the stables, developed a special bond with a gentle mare named Daisy. Mary's skill in the kitchen progressed rapidly, earning praise even from the taciturn Mrs. Winters. Little Sarah, whose nightmares had once been frequent, now slept peacefully through most nights, secure in the knowledge that she was safe and wanted. One particularly scorching afternoon in late July, Kent surprised everyone by announcing that work would end early. "The swimming hole," he declared at the midday meal. "It's too hot for man or beast to work. Thought we might all cool off a bit." The children's faces lit up with excitement, and even Penelope felt a surge of anticipation. The heat had been oppressive, making the simplest tasks exhausting. "Do you have a swimming hole on the property?" she asked. Kent nodded. "About a quarter-mile east where the creek widens and deepens. Been swimming there since I was Thomas's age." An hour later, they set out, Kent and Penelope on horseback, with Thomas riding double with Kent, and the girls traveling in a small wagon driven by Patrick, who had enthusiastically joined the expedition. The swimming hole proved to be a surprisingly large pond fed by a clear creek, shaded by cottonwood trees and bordered on one side by a small sandy beach. A rope swing hung from one of the sturdier branches, evidence of generations of summer fun. While Penelope helped the girls change into the simple swimming clothes she had hastily assembled from old linens, Kent and Patrick showed Thomas the fundamentals of swimming in the shallower area. The boy's initial fear quickly gave way to delight as he discovered he could float with Kent's supporting hands beneath him. Mary, always more cautious, waded in gradually, while Sarah splashed enthusiastically near the shore, shrieking with laughter when Patrick pretended to be a sea monster rising from the depths. Penelope, dressed in the most modest swimming attire, she could manage a calf-length dress of lightweight cotton over simple drawers, hesitated at the water's edge, until Kent approached her, water dripping from his hair and bare shoulders. He had removed his shirt but kept on his work trousers, rolled up to the knee. "Water's perfect," he encouraged. "Not too cold." Penelope dipped a toe in experimentally. "It's been years since I swam, not since I was a girl visiting my cousins in Connecticut." "Like riding a horse," Kent assured her. "You never really forget." He held out his hand. "Trust me," the question seemed to encompass more than just swimming, and they both knew it. Penelope placed her hand in his, allowing him to lead her deeper into the water. The afternoon passed in a blur of laughter and play. Kent proved to be surprisingly lighthearted away from the responsibilities of the ranch, engaging in splash battles with the children and demonstrating impressive dives from the rope swing. Penelope, once she overcame her initial shyness, rediscovered the joy of swimming, gliding through the clear water with graceful strokes that earned admiring comments from Kent. As the sun began its westward descent, they spread blankets on the grassy bank and enjoyed a simple picnic of cold chicken, bread, and the season's first early apples. The children, tired from hours of swimming, sprawled contentedly in the dappled shade, while Kent and Penelope sat close enough for their shoulders to occasionally brush. "Thank you for this," Penelope said softly. "It's been wonderful." Kent's smile was relaxed, more natural than she had ever seen it. "Been too long since this place heard laughter. My father used to bring us here at least once a week during summer. Us, me, Patrick, and our sister Alina. She lives in Denver now, married to a banker." He leaned back on his elbows, watching as Patrick showed Thomas how to skip stones across the pond's surface. "Anna and I used to bring Jamie here too. He loved the water." It was the first time Kent had voluntarily mentioned his son by name, and Penelope recognized the significance. "How old was he?" she asked gently. "6 when he died. Would have been 11 now." Kent's expression was sad but not devastated, the grief still present but tempered by time and perhaps by new attachments. "He was a good boy, lot like Thomas, actually." always asking questions, wanting to know how things worked. Penelope placed her hand over his. "Thank you for sharing that with me." Kent turned his hand to clasp hers. "Been thinking about him more lately, not with the same rawness, more remembering the good times." "That's how it should be," Penelope said. "Remembering the joy, not just the loss." Kent nodded, his thumb tracing small circles on the back of her hand. "Having the children hear you here, it's helped, more than I expected." Their eyes met, and the connection between them deepened, strengthened by shared experiences and growing understanding. For a moment, Penelope thought he might kiss her, but a shout from Thomas broke the spell. "Mr. Kent, look how far I skipped it." Kent smiled, giving Penelope's hand a final squeeze before releasing it. "5 skips is pretty good, Thomas. Want to see if you can make it 6? The boy nodded eagerly, and Kent rose to join him at the water's edge, leaving Penelope with the warm certainty that something fundamental had shifted between them. As July gave way to August, life at the ranch settled into a pattern that felt increasingly permanent. Kent and Penelope's courtship progressed steadily, marked by quiet conversations, shared responsibilities, and a growing physical awareness of each other that manifested in lingering touches and meaningful glances. The children, sensing the strengthening bond between the adults, began to refer to the ranch as home without hesitation. They had each carved out their own place within the rhythms of ranch life, Thomas as Kent's eager shadow, Mary as Penelope's capable assistant, and Sarah as the sunshine that brightened everyone's day with her imaginative stories and ready laughter. One evening, as Penelope sat at the kitchen table helping Mary with her reading, Kent entered with an unusually formal expression. "Mary," he said, "might I borrow Miss Penelope for a few minutes? There's something I'd like to discuss with her." Mary nodded solemnly. "I'll practice my letters until you return, Miss Penny." Kent led Penelope outside to the porch, where the setting sun bathed everything in golden light. He seemed uncharacteristically nervous, his usual steady confidence replaced by an almost boyish uncertainty. "Is everything all right?" Penelope asked, concerned by his demeanor. "Yes, better than all right." Kent took a deep breath. "Penelope, when you arrived here 3 months ago with 3 children in tow, I thought my carefully laid plans had been ruined." She smiled faintly. "I remember. I was wrong," he continued. "Those plans weren't worth much compared to what you've brought into my life, what all 4 of you have brought." Penelope's heart quickened as Kent reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "This was my mother's," he said, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a modest diamond. "I've been carrying it for weeks now, waiting for the right moment." He met her gaze directly. "I love you, Penelope Evans. I love your compassion, your strength, your gentle wisdom, and I love those children as if they were my own." Tears welled in Penelope's eyes as Kent took her hand. "I'm asking you properly now, will you marry me? Be my wife, my partner in everything. Let me be a father to Mary, Thomas, and Sarah." "Yes," Penelope whispered, happiness overflowing. "With all my heart, yes." Kent slipped the ring onto her finger, then drew her into his arms for their first true kiss, tender at first, then deepening with all the emotion they had been holding in check for months. When they finally parted, both breathless, Kent rested his forehead against hers. "Think the children will approve?" he asked with a smile in his voice. As if in answer, a cheer erupted from the doorway, where 3 small figures stood watching with delighted expressions. "We've been hoping you'd ask her," Thomas exclaimed, rushing forward to throw his arms around both adults. Mary and Sarah followed, and soon all 5 were embraced in a family hug that felt both new and somehow inevitable. "Does this mean you're our pa now?" Sarah asked, looking up at Kent with hopeful eyes. Kent knelt down to her level, his expression solemn but warm. "If you'll have me, yes." "I'd be honored to be your pa." "And we'd be Everett's?" Thomas asked. "Like you?" Kent glanced up at Penelope, who nodded encouragingly. "Yes," he confirmed. "Mary, Thomas, and Sarah Everett." Mary, always the most reserved, studied Kent's face carefully. "Do you really want us, truly?" "More than anything," Kent assured her. "When you arrived, I said I couldn't be a father again. I was wrong. Being your father, all of your father, it's the greatest gift I could ask for." Mary's careful composure finally broke, and she threw her arms around Kent's neck. "Then I want you to be our pa too." That night, after the children were in bed, Kent and Penelope sat together on the porch swing, her head resting on his shoulder, his arm around her waist. "When should we marry?" Penelope asked, admiring the way her ring caught the moonlight. "Soon," Kent replied, pressing a kiss to her temple. "No sense in waiting. The preacher comes through town next Sunday. Would that suit you?" Penelope laughed softly. "Eager are we. 3 months of courtship seems plenty," Kent said, his voice deepening. "Especially when I've known from almost the beginning that you were the one I wanted." "Have you really?" She turned to look at him, surprised by the admission. Kent nodded, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "Think I started falling for you that first night when you stood your ground about the children. Knew for certain after the rustlers when I rode home and saw you waiting. Understood then what it meant to have someone to come home to." "I love you, Kent Everett," Penelope said simply. "You and this life we're building together." His answer was another kiss, this one unhurried and full of promise. The wedding took place as planned the following Sunday, a simple ceremony in the town church attended by neighbors, ranch hands, and a few townsfolk who had come to know and respect the Everett family. Penelope wore a new blue dress ordered specially from Denver, and the children were scrubbed and polished to gleaming perfection in new clothes Kent had insisted on purchasing. "By the power vested in me," the traveling preacher intoned, "I now pronounce you husband and wife. Mr. Everett, you may kiss your bride." Kent's kiss was brief but tender, mindful of their audience but unmistakably conveying his happiness and love. The children cheered loudly, prompting laughter from the congregation. The celebration continued at the ranch, where tables had been set up in the yard and a feast prepared with contributions from neighboring ranches. There was music from a fiddle and harmonica, dancing on a wooden platform Patrick and the ranch hands had constructed, and enough good wishes to last a lifetime. As evening fell, lanterns were lit, casting a warm glow over the festivities. Kent found Penelope watching as Patrick taught the children a simple dance, their faces alight with joy. "Happy, Mrs. Everett?" he asked, slipping an arm around her waist. "Completely," she assured him, leaning into his embrace. "Though I still can't quite believe how fortunate we are." "Not fortune," Kent corrected. "Providence, as you once called it." As the celebration wound down and guests began to depart, Kent and Penelope found themselves surrounded by their children, all three fighting yawns but reluctant to end the magical day. "Time for bed," Penelope announced gently. "But it's your wedding night," Mary protested. "Don't you and Pa have special things to do?" Penelope blushed and Kent cleared his throat, amusement dancing in his eyes. "Yes, but those special things can wait until you three are fast asleep." Thomas frowned in confusion. "What special things?" "Grown-up conversations," Kent replied smoothly. "Now, how about I carry Sarah up to bed and you and Mary follow along?" The children acquiesced, recognizing that the celebration had truly come to an end. After they had been tucked in and kissed goodnight, Kent and Penelope retreated to what was now their shared bedroom the master suite Kent had expanded and redecorated in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Alone at last, they stood regarding each other with equal parts nervousness and anticipation. "Well, Mrs. Everett," Kent said softly, reaching for her hands. Here we are, she agreed, stepping closer. "Husband." The word seemed to ignite something in Kent, and he drew her into his arms with newfound urgency. "I've waited so long to have you here like this." "Worth the wait?" Penelope asked, her own desire evident in the breathless quality of her voice. Kent's answer was in his kiss, deep and passionate, and in the reverent way his hands moved over her, unfastening the buttons of her wedding dress with surprising dexterity. That night, they discovered each other fully for the first time, learning the language of each other's bodies with tenderness and growing passion. And in the quiet aftermath, as they lay entwined in the moonlight filtering through the curtains, Penelope knew with absolute certainty that she had found her true home. "I never thought I could be this happy again," Kent murmured against her hair. "After Anna and Jamie. I thought that part of my life was over. And now I understand that love doesn't diminish when it's shared, it grows." He propped himself up on one elbow to look into her eyes. "What you and the children have given me, it doesn't erase what I lost, but it fills the empty spaces. Makes me whole again. Penelope reached up to trace the line of his jaw. That's exactly how I feel, like we've all been given a second chance at family. Kent smiled, the expression transforming his face with boyish charm. Speaking of family, how would you feel about adding to ours someday? Not right away, perhaps, but I'd like that very much, Penelope assured him, though I think we have our hands full at the moment with the three we already have. True enough. Kent settled beside her again, drawing her close. But I'm thinking a little sister or brother for them might be nice. Eventually, Penelope smiled against his chest, contentment washing through her. Eventually, she agreed, the seasons turned, summer giving way to fall and then to winter. Christmas at the Everett Ranch that year was a joyous affair, with a tall pine tree cut from the North Ridge and decorated with paper chains, dried berries, and small wooden ornaments Kent had carved in the evenings. Presents were exchanged, practical gifts like new boots and warm scarves, but also special treasures like the illustrated book of fairy tales Kent had ordered from Chicago for Sarah, the junior tool set for Thomas, and the beautiful journal for Mary. For Penelope, Kent had crafted a delicate music box that played a tune his mother had loved, the melody sweet and clear in the quiet moments before sleep. Spring arrived with its promise of renewal, bringing with it confirmation of the new life growing within Penelope. When she shared the news with Kent one evening in late April, his joy was boundless, lifting her in a careful embrace and spinning her around before setting her gently on her feet. Careful, she laughed. We don't want to upset the baby. Sorry, he said, not looking sorry at all, just happy. Telling the children was a more measured affair. They gathered them in the parlor after supper one evening, Kent and Penelope sitting together on the sofa with the children arranged before them. We have something important to tell you, Kent began, his hand finding Penelope's. Are we moving? Thomas asked immediately, his expression worried. No, nothing like that, Penelope assured him. This is happy news. Very happy news, Kent added. You're going to have a new brother or sister. The children's reactions were mixed: Sarah's immediate delight, Thomas's cautious excitement, and Mary's thoughtful consideration. When? Mary asked. Around harvest time, Penelope replied. Late September or early October. Will you still love us the same? Thomas's question cut to the heart of the matter. Kent drew the boy onto his lap. Thomas Everett, listen to me carefully. Nothing will ever change how much we love you, Mary and Sarah. This new baby isn't replacing anyone. It's just one more person to love. Like when you became our pa, Sarah said with the simple wisdom of childhood. Your heart just got bigger to fit all of us. Kent smiled, visibly moved by her understanding. Exactly like that, princess. Mary, always the most perceptive, studied Penelope's face. You're really happy about this, aren't you, Ma? The term of endearment, which the children had begun using shortly after the wedding, still filled Penelope with warmth. Very happy, Mary, and even happier knowing I have you three to help me when the baby comes. Mary nodded, decision made. I'll learn everything about taking care of babies. I'll be the best big sister ever. We all will, Thomas declared, his initial concerns forgotten in the face of this new responsibility. And so the Everett family prepared for its newest member, the summer passing in a flurry of preparations. Kent converted a small room adjacent to their bedroom into a nursery, painting the walls a cheerful yellow and crafting a beautiful cradle from oak harvested from their own land. Penelope and the children sewed blankets, tiny garments, and soft toys, filling the house with anticipation and love. On a crisp autumn morning, with leaves turning gold on the cottonwoods by the creek, Penelope went into labor. The children were sent to stay with Patrick in the foreman's cabin, while Mrs. Winters and a midwife from town attended to Penelope. Kent, refusing to be banished from his own home as tradition dictated, paced the hallway outside their bedroom, wearing a path in the floorboards with his anxious footsteps. The labor was long and difficult, stretching through the day and into the night. But just as dawn broke over the eastern plains, a new cry joined the morning chorus of birds and distant cattle, strong, indignant, and unmistakably alive. Mr. Everett, the midwife called from the doorway, her face tired but smiling. You have a daughter. Kent entered the bedroom to find Penelope propped against pillows, exhausted but radiant, cradling a small bundle wrapped in a soft blanket. "Kent," she whispered as he approached, "come meet your daughter." He sat carefully on the edge of the bed, emotion etched in every line of his face as he gazed at the tiny, perfect features of his newborn child. "She's beautiful," he said, his voice rough with feeling. "Like her mother." Penelope smiled, leaning against him as he put an arm around her shoulders. "What shall we name her?" Kent considered for a moment. "How about a leaner Anna Everett for my sister and—" He trailed off, but Penelope understood. "It's perfect," she agreed. "Ellie for short," Kent nodded, gently touching the baby's small hand. 5 perfect fingers curled reflexively around his much larger one, and the connection was immediate and profound. "Hello, Ellie," he murmured. "Welcome to the family." Later that day, once Penelope had rested and the baby had been fed, the children were allowed in to meet their new sister. They approached the bed with almost comical caution, eyes wide with wonder at the tiny person nestled in Penelope's arms. "She's so small," Thomas whispered, peering closely at the baby. "She'll grow," Kent assured him, ruffling the boy's hair. "Just like you all have. Can I hold her?" Mary asked, her usual composure briefly displaced by eagerness. Penelope nodded, carefully transferring the baby to Mary's waiting arms, showing her how to support the tiny head. "That's it, just like that." Mary's expression of concentration gave way to one of wonder as she gazed down at her sister. "Hello, Ellie. I'm your big sister, Mary, and I'm going to teach you everything I know." "Me next," Thomas insisted, and then Sarah, each taking turns holding the baby with the careful supervision of both parents. As Penelope watched her family gathered around the newest addition, her heart swelled with a happiness so complete it brought tears to her eyes. From the orphaned children she had brought west in desperation to this moment of perfect belonging, the journey had been unexpected but infinitely precious. Kent, noticing her tears, leaned down to press a kiss to her forehead. "Happy," he whispered. "Beyond words," she replied, reaching for his hand. "Thank you for taking us in, even when it wasn't what you planned." "Best decision I ever made," Kent said simply. "The day you stepped off that train with 3 children in tow, that was the day my life truly began again." Sarah, who had been listening with childish curiosity, piped up. "Remember what you said, Pa, when Ma told you about us?" Kent smiled, remembering the words that had seemed so daunting at the time but had proven to be prophetic. "I do, Princess," I said, "then I'm a father again." "And now you're a father 4 times over," Penelope said softly. Kent gazed around at his family, the strong, compassionate woman who had brought love back into his life, the 3 resilient children who had claimed his heart with their courage and trust, and the tiny new daughter who represented their shared future. In their faces, he saw not just the family he had lost, but the family he had been given a second chance, more beautiful and complete than he could have imagined. "So I am," he agreed, his voice rich with emotion, "and I wouldn't have it any other way." Outside the window, the Kansas sun shone bright and clear over the Everett Ranch, where once there had been only grief and solitude. Now stood a home filled with laughter, love, and the promise of all the years to come.